Who I have up with me today, or now, is Aaron Brockmeier. Aaron is lead pastor at Faith Baptist in Minneapolis, and he's also one of our city directors for Made to Flourish. And I've had the privilege of working on some strategy stuff with his church and having a great time doing that. Erik Dunkin is the winner of our sermon competition for last year. He pulled off a sermon that was judged by professors at Bethel as being good, really, really good. And he was in competition with some folks who also had put together sermons that were really, really good. And so we've asked them to come and join Tim so that we could have a conversation with them. And my first question is going to be for Tim, because I do want him to share with us in what ways, how did he go about the process of exegeting crosswinds? What were some of the signals that you got from the flock that you were leading that helped you exegete them so that you could make the connection between the text, between the Word of God, and their lives?
Yep. Okay, other than just, being their pastor and kind of knowing people because you minister to them, there's that. But also, and the feel, just being there long enough. But we did some strategic things that helped. One of the things that we did is we invited everybody one night just to come and give us feedback on what moved their heart in terms of ministry that they thought needed to be done. And gosh, that was eye-opening because we started to see what was important to people. And we had pretty good turnout. I don't know, we had close to 50 people, and not bad. And so, which represented fairly good cross-section of our church. And we just laid out big
piece of paper on the table.
Paper on the table.
Markers on the table, and I gave him some directions.
I think we had categories, didn't we?
Yep, I had, yep.
Yep, so you put down categories, and under those different broader categories, people started writing down their ideas, and some ideas sparked other ideas. And so then as leadership, we took that and we went back and we studied a little bit and started to see where art people, at least a cross-section of art people were at. Kind of what was moving in their minds and in their heart on what the church should be. And that's not only good for leadership to kind of see where your people are, it's really good for the people, because what you're saying is we care. If we believe in the priesthood of all believers, then we should believe that God is, and His Spirit is working through the people in the church, right? So they have something to say, and so in a day maybe when we tout so much leadership, good leadership goes to your people and allows them to speak, and so we use that, and that helped us to really kind of understand. There are other things that we did with leadership. And when you bring all your leaders, we had all leaders meeting, right? So when they're all there, we had 25 leaders there, and that also gives you kind of a cross section, a little skewed maybe because they're in leadership positions, but we would talk as well, and we would flesh out their ideas, and so a lot of it is listening, creating opportunities for people to give feedback.
Great. All right, Erik. Why don't you share with them a little bit about where you are and what brought you into the competition, and what were some of the things that you learned in preparing that sermon for us?
Yeah, so my name is Erik, and I was in Cedar Falls, Iowa, in the University of Northern Iowa when I gave the sermon that won the award, or much to my shock. I was like, what? I forgot I even submitted that.
Is there a money thing involved with that?
Yeah, there was a TV there.
Those are the best kind of awards, right there. But yeah, so, and now, 2 months ago, I moved to Madison, Wisconsin. And so I talked to my financial advisor. They also said I was not ready for retirement, sadly. And but I did retire from my position as a college pastor, aka resign in Cedar Falls. And so now I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a going to be a full-time middle school teacher this fall in Madison. And then I'll also be with a parachurch ministry called the Navigators on campus, overseeing their large group meeting, preaching and teaching for that. And I'm also part of a church plan there. So kind of just, Madison was home for us. So we just really wanted to be in Madison, kind of long haul, raise our kids there. So so that's where we are now. As far as getting into this whole thing, I was with the Navigators through college, and the Navs are an incredibly strong discipleship-oriented, spiritual disciplines-oriented ministry, big focus on the nations. And I think that the Navs really embody something that I've come to articulate, similar to what you did in your presentation, a focus that is so present in evangelicalism, which is the focus on conversion, right? Conversion, and kind of, I would call like this enthronement of conversion is the highest goal, and enthronement of conversion is the highest aim of the Christian life. My goal, what's the reason you're alive? Well, the reason I'm alive is to tell other people about Jesus, or something like that. And I would just say, as I was with a Navigator, I just heard so much of that. I also heard this phrase often with this, there's three things that last forever: the Word of God, God, and the souls of men. And I was like, is that true? And if that is true, then like, why are we spending so much other time like doing other things, or whatever? And so I just wrestled with those types of things. And as I did, I just began to come into some work resources. The first thing that changed my perspective was Alan Wakabayashi, great last name, with InterVarsity Press, wrote a book called Kingdom Come. And that book changed my whole perspective, and that's what started me thinking about work. And then from there, I found other resources and started exploring. Eventually found Made to Flourish, Kern, ended up becoming a Kern Scholar at Seminary, all that. So that was kind of my journey there. But what I've come to see is that I think that the highest aim of the Christian life is not conversions, but it's conformity. It's conformity to Christ. So that's kind of how I started to articulate that with people, that our goal of your life, the goal of others, is not conversions, but conformity to Christ. And if people are conforming to the image of Christ, well then, like, they're going to tell other people about Jesus. Like, that's going to happen. They're going to be other-centered. And so conformity to Christ really is the focus of a pastor, even. Our goal is not to help people tell more people about Jesus. Our goal is to have more people live like Jesus. And if that happens, then other people will hear. And then that will happen. But, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. And for Aaron, here's my question for you. Aaron and I have been going around the block on this now for 5 years. Yeah, he's one of the very first pastors that I connected with as I started to get my head around this. He's a Kern Scholar, and also comes into his pastor role as an engineer. And he's just made a transition from the church that he was at in Faribault to the church in Minneapolis. So my question for you is, what has it been like now to cast this vision into your new church?
Yeah. So I think what Tim pointed out, that the church is often church-centric. Like, that's as far as we can see. And so as I've come into the church was doing a good job of being church-centric. And so what I've worked on doing is expanding our vocabulary, expanding our insight, expanding where the gospel is to go in our community and in our individual lives. And so that's really entailed a lot of me getting to know, there's 200 people at Faith on a Sunday, getting to know more than just the personal devotion aspect of people's lives. Asking them, hey, can I visit you at work? And they're like, oh, you don't want to visit me at work. There's nothing goes on there. Getting on LinkedIn and finding out their jobs and their vocations, and really trying to learn who they are, and then speaking into those areas in a widening way. So really trying to think through my sermons, and I have 3 artists at my church, 3 really good artists. I know nothing about art, but trying to learn and trying to every once in a while think through, okay, how does this application apply to an artist in their creative work? Or on Sunday, I preached on the prodigal son and the father. When the prodigal son is in that eating pig slop, he remembers the generosity of his father. And I took a moment, I said, I would love to be a father that is known by his generosity with my kids. And I love our church, like when people have left it, that they would remember, or the community, even if they don't come to it, would know that we are a church that's generous. And then I said, and if you're owning a business, because I knew a lot of people there, what about putting that as one of your values, that you would be known as a business leader that exemplifies generosity and love. And so if people knew anything about you, they wouldn't know about your bottom line profit, but they would know that you are an organization known for generosity. And being able to connect that on a regular basis with the preaching, really widening that base so it's church and the rest of life.
Thank you. Okay, those are my questions. What are your questions?
I have a question for Aaron to start with. Rochester to North Minneapolis?
Faribault, yeah.
Faribault, North Minneapolis,
Yeah.
which is a huge cultural.
It is.
How did you choose North Minneapolis?
My wife and I, we were both involved in urban inner city ministry in Denver. And so Faribault was a sweet time of respite, a time where you saw a little bit of the integration, the work and the community was all together. But we just longed for that diversity of the city, and so chose North Minneapolis over that.
But you'd also be quite surprised at how diverse Faribault is becoming.
I guess it is. I think I have heard of that.
Yeah.
Where are you located in North Minneapolis?
We're up in 44th and Russell, so kind of north Minneapolis, about 30 blocks from the center of, when you hear about North Minneapolis, 20 blocks from.
I live on the other side of the river.
Okay.
Yeah, questions? Yeah, good.
You talked about wanting your church to be known for generosity. What kinds of actions, or what was the follow-up to that? What kinds of things have you guys done in your church to be known for that?
We have Teddy Ann meeting with our strategic team and helping us to think through the next step in our church. It started as a bunker, a basement church, built up a fortress. The last renovation, they put windows all around. They said, we want to open up to the community. And now we're saying we want to get out into the community and love and serve. And so we are talking through that in a practical, church-focused way, but I'm encouraging individuals as we live in the community to live that out individually. So right now we're working with Teddy Ann for strategically thinking through that.
And Dan.
Our churches, our pastor and myself are on the same wavelength as I become the vocational advocate and he is the preaching pastor. But we come at odds with the hymnology and the vocabulary in the hymnology. How do you get around that? Because that's a lot of what people take home. That's what rings in their head. It's not always the preaching. It's actually the worship experience they have. How do you change that hymnology that, in my opinion, is so bad? It talks about salvation, or it talks about, I guess Amy Sherman would talk about a narrow gospel, a sin management gospel, but it doesn't really expand their thinking beyond their personal religious experience to a broader vision of what God's called us to do as humans and as a people of God. How do you change the hymnology?
There's lots of great hymns that will touch on those topics. So I think you work with your worship person.
Yeah.
Well, that would actually be, in our case, part of the problem, because it's a very sentimental, quiet, worshipful kind of personal devotion. And is there such a thing as a repository that the faith work and economic community has, to where I don't have to go through the hymns or make a point? Is there
if you go to Made to Flourish, there's a liturgy component. Go to Made to Flourish, the website. There's tons of resources, and one of them will be in liturgy, and you'll have some of the suggested songs, and you can dig from there for other songs. But there, again, I would say it's a conversation with the worship team, the worship leaders. We're talking more about God's reign. There are songs that talk about God's reign and emphasizing that, or following Christ in all of life. And that's an easy starting place. The Gettys have a workers' prayer hymn that's wonderful. We've been looking to introduce that into the church, and even just in the liturgy of your language and the everyday language. Just being careful in how you communicate, and maybe For us, it wasn't like, as I came in, we weren't going to start everything new, but I've been trying to add on to, add on to the language to broaden it so that we support missions overseas and each one of our missions in our individual life. So anding a lot of the stuff instead of completely changing it.
Well, Tom Nelson's talked about the liturgy, not so much specific to the music, but how he started moving other components around. So when he would do the benediction or the blessing, he's intentionally choosing blessings and benedictions that are incorporating, that's where I think he uses Psalm 90, 16, 17, somewhere in there. Establish the work of our hands, that's one he said he uses a lot. Doing commissioning services for not just for people doing short-term work or clearly identified Christian ministry, but for other ministry, educators or healthcare, or where are you at? Where's your church at?
Down in Franklin and Cedar.
Okay, so if you have especially a particular industry that a lot of your people are employed in, start there, because you'll get better at the group. But that's some things that Tom Nelson suggested. I've heard him suggest multiple times that I think have been helpful, where you don't have to mess with the music, where people are going to be like, oh, no, but you're like, hey, let's share the 3T thing that you're talking about, the TTT thing. Those are pieces you can incorporate sometimes that don't freak your worship leader out completely because you're not moving their cheese entirely, but you start to get people thinking a little more broadly.
I'm going to get us back on preaching, but I do want to mention that there are two excellent resources for integrating faith and work liturgically, and one is the Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, which is used in the Greek Orthodox Church, and then also the Book of Common Prayer has got tons and tons of prayers and blessings that are very, very oriented to our life outside the community of worship. Another question on preaching, on connecting preaching with the life of the church.
Yeah, for Erik, it sounds like you've got a dual role as pastor and teacher. Did I hear that right?
Yep.
How does that influence your preaching on this subject? So having a foot in both.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that like my willingness or openness or even desire to go towards a bivocation and not just full-time paid ministry was really informed by my journey over these past several years. So as we transitioned to Madison, I was unemployed, for a while there. I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to do, and so the job that kind of made me like, okay, I can fully resign from my job in Cedar Falls, and I can go to Madison. Was a full-time valet, so just parking cars, and so I did that for the past 2 months. But then, like, while I was sitting bored at the valet stand, I was on my smartphone, like, applying for other jobs. So it was a really bad job. It doesn't have to be a bad job, but it was made a bad job for a number of things. But anyway, yeah. So then being a teacher, that's at least more in line with like my field, and feels like something, and I've done that in the past. That like feels pretty good. But I love that when I stand up at Nav Night, kind of the worship gathering of the Navigators on a Friday night, I can introduce myself as a middle school English teacher on the West Side. Not like I'm full-time staff here or whatever. I love that, and I think that gives a lot of like credibility to students. And I don't know the long term for me, but originally as we kind of transitioned to Madison, we were exploring church planting a lot, and I'm involved with the church plant, and I'm really potentially interested in like bivocational church planting. I think that there's a lot of future in that in America, in North America, for a number of reasons. But so yeah, I think it's exciting. Admittedly, I'm teaching in a private Christian school. Partly that's the necessity of I need to update my licensure. And a private Christian school would hire somebody without updated licensure. But I would like to be in a public school. I much prefer that. So I kind of would like to make that, because I just would desire to rub shoulders with and be for the life of not only the Christian world, but for the life of the world in Madison. So
I'd like to make a plug for the idea of being bivocational. I've been a bivocational pastor now for 10 years and a bivocational church leader for like 30 years, which is kind of startling. But there is something to be, even if it's just a part-time job, 10 hours a week, there is something to be said for living a part of your vocational life outside the confines of that protected space that we call the church, where you really have to contend with the powers that are out there that are trying to mess with the message of the gospel. And it's one thing to hear about it and come in to kind of clean up the mess among our parishioners. It's another thing to be there. Bart's smiling at me because he's doing this every day. It's another thing to actually be there in the place where the mess is happening. And so, even if it's just a summer job or a part of your sabbatical is you go wait tables someplace or whatever, there's just something to be said for that. My father always told me, Teddy Ann, if you ever lose that fancy job you got at General Mills, don't forget you can always wait tables. Because I grew up in a big fat Greek restaurant. And I was like, yep, it's okay to be out there and doing that. Yeah, Andy.
Yeah, I encourage you, sign up to become an Uber driver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You will get to see and hear a lot of pain because you're just driving drunk people around.
Yeah.
But really what's going on out there in the community. My question is, so what's the greatest cause of this segmented, compartmentalized faith? This, I'm a Christian on Sunday, but I'm something else Monday through Saturday. What's the biggest contributor to that? And then how would you go after that in your sermon? What kind of illustrations or what kind of way would you cast your vision into seeing a homogeneous Christian faith?
I'm going to answer the question, the first part of the question, then I'm going to let them answer the how to fix it. The reason why? The church. Because, I'm just telling you, because we elevated the office of pastor and the office of missionary to a high, high place. And then we perpetuated the notion that what the rest of us were supposed to do is go out there and make money so that we can give our tithes and offerings to support the work of the church. And we lost sight, the church lost sight of the priesthood of all believers in about the year 400 AD. Got it back around the Reformation, and then we've lost it again. And so that's why we're our own problem. Now, how do you guys fix it?
Well, I'll just say something more about the problem. I think part of the problem also is that we work hard at enlisting, training, and putting people in ministry in the church. And so much, and it's hard to, if you have a lot of ministries, it's hard to find a lot of people to do ministry. So you're always talking to people about their ministry in the church, in the church, in the church.
Which is appropriate and good, right?
I'm sorry?
Which is appropriate and good.
Yeah, the church has to be healthy, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So, you need to do what you're going to do. Although I would give a plug in to do less, but what you do great. Then you need fewer people to run the machinery of the church. But we put such an emphasis on keeping up the church that we lose emphasis on ministry outside the church.
I would say one of the ways to deal with it is good theology. I think good exegesis, where you have Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and Revelation 21, and you preach through Jesus' parables, and you realize that there's 40 of the 50 that deal with marketplace illustrations, and that Jesus taught in the marketplace. And you begin to, we bought a Honda Odyssey a couple years ago. I didn't know they existed. My wife did. I had never really seen them out there. And you bought it, and all of a sudden you see it all around. And then you're looking for them, and you're counting them, and then you're asking other people about them, and all of a sudden it's all over. And I think the same thing is true for the church, that when you begin to help people buy into this good theology, this picture of Christ's rule and reign from creation to new creation, then you begin, once you begin to see it. You see it all over Scripture, and you begin to see it all over life, and you can begin to advocate for it. So I go back to good theology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that so much of what is underneath the unhealthy aspects of much of our workplace today, and our just kind of greed-oriented, bottom line-oriented approach to most jobs, is just the commodification of the human person and making all people just transactional. And so in every profession and in every aspect of life, kind of bring back not only the theology of work, but also the theology of the dignity of every human person made in the image of God. So a phrase that I'll often use is that all good work serves God because all good work serves the image of God. All good work serves God because all good work serves the image of God. So if we see every human person as an image bearer of God, and if we elevate and value the dignity of every person, and then we follow down the line in our really complicated, multifaceted economic system that we have and that we are all a part of, and we say, okay, look at this job, and then look down the line at how eventually this job serves people and provides them with something that's helpful, or that they need, or that will bring pleasure or life to them in some way, then you're ultimately serving an image bearer of God. And so helping them to see that every good work, it's eventually serving people and providing them with something that that image bearer of God needs.
Gentlemen, well said. Well said.
I also think that
Last
once
word.
you immerse yourself in good theology and really start teaching from the pulpit, you also find yourself looking for stories that explain that. And stories are illustrations and stories are really important. Personal stories, not of your own life, but of others, is really important. And so you just automatically start looking for those things. And so I can't tell you what. I can just say that once your leadership is convinced of what the church, being a whole life disciple making church, and you're convinced of it, and your theology is in line with that, and you start preaching and teaching it, you're just gonna find all kinds of material and illustrations that support that.
You'll start seeing the Odyssey.
Yeah.